Welcome to the IDIPAC, the third webinar in the summer series. So, what we're going to talk about, sustainability, delivered through a practical and pragmatically engineered set of solutions, hopefully. My name's Chris Waterhouse. As I say, I'd like to welcome you to the second of the three seminars in the IDIPAC 2018 summer series. We're going to focus on delivery this week, or on this webinar. And how that can link to business success, we're hoping. Crucial to future growth, and a failure to embrace may not help your business in the longer term. So we're going to highlight the importance of engagement with challenges for pack sustainability, develop the strategy, add value to the business, and create ongoing success. Using packaging actually as a vehicle that can help you demonstrate to your customers, to your stakeholders, stockholders, and so on and so forth, and articulate, which I didn't do very well there, but there you go, the benefits of sustainable thinking. So sustainable, bit of a hard word to say, to be honest. New set of teeth required. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at very briefly, sustainability. Some of the high-level approaches we've got, hopefully the ones that don't kill turtles. An approach that's we believe is novel, pragmatic, to deliver those benefits, and a kind of mechanism, methodology. What is the methodology? The benefits of it, and we'll show you a couple of case studies on that. Some thoughts and a bit of a rant, to be honest, on observations on government policy, and then a case study of CPET moving towards biodegradable type materials, some next steps and some final thoughts. Importantly, we can't solve the problems using the same kind of thinking when we created them. That's what Albert said, Albert Einstein, reasonably clever chap, and I think we're going to try and develop that thinking today. Okay, so some quick definitions and some thoughts in terms of what we're going to be talking about. So in eco terms, what is that? It's about that move towards sustainable materials, changing the material choices that you make when you're developing new packs, and of course the packaging designer's mantra: reduce, reuse, recycle, and maybe even reclaim as well. And there's probably a few more R's as well. And there's also a business approach. You know, the drive to reduce cost, to create flexibility in your supply chain, to deliver that benefit, to create the benefit in the supply chain. Richest man on the planet currently, Jeff Bezos. You know, in business, what's dangerous? It's dangerous not to evolve. And that's so important. We've got to evolve to survive, and thinking in a different way is the right way to go. What I'm going to try and do is show how we might bring the two together in the business and packaging context, take the debate to the interesting and hopefully coherent point as we move through these webinars. Okay, so the novel methodology, and we've derived it called something called performance defined packaging. Now that might seem that's what everybody does anyway. The reality is we've got a different approach to it. It's a methodology that delivers through independence and science. We're using independence as a key element, and also science. So what we're going to say is, and of course you'd expect me to say this, there are other people that do this, but IDIPAC, we've got no axe to grind. We've got only good thinking to put into the debate. We need the skills of a technician. We need supply chain understanding, we need manufacturing expertise, and all that experience all roll into a company, a supplier, a vendor, whatever you want to call it. It would be arrogant for me to say, as I say, that we're a unique company who have that blend of skills. We can do it, but there are others. But we've derived that methodology that works, in our view, every time. No axe to grind, as I say, and we're looking forward to showing you what we're doing at a very, very high level. So, performance defined packaging. So as I said earlier, it's a science and technology based approach that starts to knock down some of the hurdles and the barriers with the more commercially focused folks, maybe procurement type folks. It's an entirely inclusive process. So the process itself is inclusive. We talk to different parts of the organization, and to describe the process, what we do, we start off with our kick off, our develop the scope, get the brief, and then we develop that into interviews. A set of interviews that are with manufacturing folks, with supply folks, with material specialists, and we're also researching and doing a variety of things in parallel. At the end of that, we define a set of attributes, characteristics, if you will, of the packaging materials. And that the materials we've worked on so far have been board, have been foils, have been thermoform plastics. The great thing about it is we create these characteristics. It doesn't say we have to have a cardboard box of a certain dimension, of a certain thickness or whatever. It says we have to have a cardboard box or a material, cardboard, that behaves in a particular way. And that is how it creases, how it takes ink, how it does whatever things. And the same with the thermoform trays. So as we move through the process, we develop this PDP, the specification, for want of a better word. That's a word we use. And we go around a couple of loops on that. Client feedback, supplier feedback, those sorts of things, and come up with some line trials. Now, the line trials are there so we can validate the hypotheses we're putting forward within the defined packaging system. So it's a simple process. It's consistent because it's fact-based. It's inclusive because we're talking to all the folks in the organization and in the outside supply chain. So it's not just we're here from head office here to help, but it creates that buy-in across the business. Consistency of approach, which folks hopefully will buy into and develop, because there's a benefit for all. So the whole process, put it all together, we end up with a coherent and hopefully effective cross-organisation buy-in. Okay, so some typical outcomes. The way it works, we develop these functional characteristics. We create a flexibility in component supply. Now, how do we do that? That's because we're talking about, if we talk about a carton board, for example, there are more than one carton board suppliers. So we create component supply flexibility. We identify hidden savings opportunities and a reduction in sourcing complexity potentially, be it vendor, be it materials. With that, we create a cost reduction. The ability to generate competition in your supply chain, the ability to create competition between vendors, all those sorts of things create that benefit to the customer company. We create agility as well, because we're not tied to particular material suppliers. We're tied to a characteristic of the material, of which there are many. And therefore, once we've validated that process, we can start to deliver a variety of different vendors without having to worry about material changes. It gives us an ability to change materials. And that then gives us an ability to lightweight as well, because we're saying we need a particular strength, a particular performance characteristic. We can start to use that as an ability to lightweight. Now that, in many cases, is quite tiny. The components we're dealing with in packaging tend to be quite lightweight anyway. But it gives us that opportunity. And once you start to factor in the multipliers that are the big companies, the cosmetics companies, the confectionery companies, pharmaceutical companies, they start to generate all this extra incremental cost or reduction in weight and reduction in cost is associated with that. So we create that, we lightweight, and it also reduces our need for line trials, because once we've validated the characteristics rather than a particular supplier, we can then say, hey, it works for this supplier with these characteristics, therefore other suppliers with the same characteristics of material, we can move forward. So it saves us long-term line trial time. The other thing it allows us to do is it allows us, and this is where the sustainability piece comes into it, is it allows us to develop the characteristics. The characteristics might be delivered by a conventional board, as an example, or a sustainable board, or a thermoform material tray, whatever it happens to be. We can start to use that because we're developing the characteristics rather than the specific material, and that allows us to move towards items or materials that are considered more sustainable, and I'll come on to those in a minute. Okay, so it gives us flexibility of supply with cost reductions and with the eco story as well, less environmental impact. Do we need to do the PDP? Well, the reality is we need time. We need expertise in the supply chain, in the packaging technology, structural design, those sorts of things. But we also need access. And you might think, well, it's going to take an age of time. We need the PDP process. but it doesn't take that long, to be perfectly honest. So in our project so far, initial outputs have been within 6-7 weeks. And that's evaluation. Of course, it depends on the size of the business, the scope of the work, but fundamentally, it's a relatively quick process. And we've got to pilot stage in about 12 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks. That's the sorting out the pilot trials, validating the hypotheses, and taking it forward. And within that, another month later, we're into the world of implementation. That's producing book cartons, that's producing foils, thermoform trays, whatever it happens to be, and we move forward. So it's a pretty quick process in reality. And we have initial costs, of course we do. You know, there is a cost. And let's assume that's a zero line there. And the red lines, the solid red lines, that's the cost of our time. It's not a lot. We're talking in the initial phase, maybe £15,000 to £30,000 in effort and time. Then a little bit more it depends on the size of the line trials. That's down to materials and line time. But after that, in this particular instance, the savings we're estimating at 2.9 million. So a huge return on investment. You know, really quick, a month or two in terms of investment. And at the end of the day, what that also allows you to do, it's a way of being able to demonstrate very quickly to your stakeholders, to your stockholders, to the board, that actually the packaging can be used in a way that delivers eco savings. It shows you to be a leader in your field of business, and it allows you to tell folks about it. And that is all about creating a leading and sustainable strategy, whatever the sustainable means, whether it's business or whether it's eco or something else in the business. So moving forward. Okay, so there are, of course, other ways of developing the sustainable approach. There is something we call late stage customization. Been done for a while, but technology has improved significantly. It means you can make what you need. You can make or decorate later and later in the supply chain, and that creates reduced waste, and it creates flexibility within your supply chain. That's been done with Apple, with engraving on iPads and so on and so forth, often by third parties. It's been done in the agrochemical markets there. That pack is something I was involved with a number of years ago. That's a pack that's a pouch inside a pack. So the pouch was done in large manufacturing sites. The outer, very simple carton or sleeve, actually cardboard sleeve, which can be printed actually very simply. Desktop printer in actual fact. So that was able to be put into a decentralized supply chain, which is what we developed for that one. And that gives you lower CO2 levels. Your densities on pallets improve. And it allows you to use local resources to actually do the packing at late stage, giving you the flexibility within country to do those sorts of things. As I say, the decentralized supply chain model, it goes against the grain to a lot of us, but actually it's an opportunity to reduce CO2 because your efficiencies improve quite significantly. And modeling that is a really interesting area. Developing e-leaflets using your phones, the smartphones, of which there are an absolute mountain of in the less developed parts of the world, bizarrely. Using that for info packs, information sharing. Stop using leaflets, patient information leaflets, instruction leaflets, those sorts of things. And it also allows us to change materials. And then we got secondary uses as well. And there's lots of other things as well. So we've still got at home from when we had children, the diapers, the nappies. There were crates where Pampers were selling the diapers in crates. Those crates are still in use today. All right, they're in my garage, storing man garage and all that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, they were really useful items. They've got a secondary use. So actually, the amount of waste that went to landfill from us in that respect, yeah, it was the nappy at the time. But the reality of it was the packaging itself was kept and only the functional item was lost. I know there are better things now. Okay, so developing the use of sustainable materials. So the first thing, what are sustainable materials? It's important that we recognize that we use total cost as the key driver. But there's something perhaps like sugar beet. Now sugar beet, some folks have heard about it, it's relatively new. Sugar beet is completely compostable. Is it microwavable? Yes, it is actually. We can actually put liners in it, biodegradable liners. So those types of things are available to us and they're being generated from waste. So sugar beet as one, very similar fiber approach to paper. So very similar usages and those sorts of things. Then you have something like coconut fiber. Okay, it's great, looks great, really nice as a pack. But you know what? Is it as sustainable as we really think it is? I'm not really clear about how many coconuts and palm trees are growing in Petersfield where we are now. So what about the transport costs? What about the CO2? Again, it's that total cost of goods that we can measure and work through. Then there's starch and cellulose. So I should have shown these actually. There's the sugar beet. That's the sugar beet item. Very simple. Lovely texture, nice and smooth, lined if you want it. Then there's the cellulose type things. That's fine as well. Coconut fibre. There's some behind me somewhere. There we go. So the coconut fibre. You know, great pack. Lovely pack. Looks really good. Smashing. But where's it come from? Then you got the bagasse coming from sugar beet. These items, as we go on, more and more available. But are they really coming from places, you know, sugar beet? Some sugar cane, sorry. It's got to come from a long way away. And therefore, what about the impact in getting it to Northern Europe? But you know what? I'm not convinced about this bamboo as well. All this stuff is about, and it's all considered sustainable because of whatever we think it is. But maybe there's other approaches. Maybe actually we'd be better on looking at some of the historical things. Are these better? Glass, tin, or aluminium in this case. Are they actually better? The reality of it is that if the systems are in place and done better, we can make up stories. I can give you any amount of information about why paper bags are better than plastic bags or plastic bags are better than paper bags. The fact of the matter is we can change the scheme, we can change the system that we do the CO2 counts and the environmental impact counts. But the fact of the matter is we can change the rules. We can change the rules and we can work through it. So using the older materials actually may be better than trying to force fit into the perception of sustainable materials. And maybe it's all a little bit, in reality, it's all about fake news. So government policy. So in the UK, we have no container deposits, or very few. Every council has different rules. It's disconnected. The policies are disconnected. They're misaligned with policy. Glass is sent to mix recycle. So why do we send glass to recycle? Because actually it's heavy, because we can get rid of it easily, and because we can do things. Now, we lived in Switzerland as young, well, when I was a little bit younger. And Switzerland had it all connected, a little bit like the communication systems. There was papers, newspapers. We had to buy string from the local post office of the correct type that allowed us to bundle the string, the magazines and newspapers into the right size carton, and then they were collected through a proper scheme. There were bin bags that you had to pay for. And you know what? In 2 or 3 years, with 2 relatively young children, sort of 10-year-old children, we were able to survive in a week's disposal with a 35-litre bag of landfill, because we had to pay for it. Now, if that's part of the story, because the rest of it was sustainably managed and there was a coherent policy. So it was great in many ways. It was available, convenient, and it was possible. So looking now at a little bit of a case study about how we might do things. So the background on this particular one was that it's a ready meal tray. So the ready meal tray, typically made from CPET or polypropylene. It was only food grade plastic, really suitable for oven use, to be honest, isn't it? It is recyclable, but it's typically burned, and that's burned because you can't distinguish it from PET at sorting. It contaminates the waste stream. So it's a problem. It's a problem. The brief, the whole brief, find a sustainable material for the ready meal trays. That was our brief. So, using the functional properties required through the PDP process, we started to develop this approach. We found materials that had to retain the shape, and this blindingly obvious a number of these, of course. Retain the shape, suitable for products that are heated in conventional microwave ovens, have to be formable into decent shapes, suitable for use with the fatty and acidic foods, and had to be able to form seals. We had to help the food look better, of course, and of course a lot of it's chilled or frozen, get it for good impact resistance. and ideally, because of the capital costs, run on existing equipment and have high barrier contents. So they're the sort of things, and of course there are a bunch of other things which we can't really talk about just now in this forum. So yeah, we identified the attributes, we looked at the known material types and the products, and we created a shortlist. And from that, we were able to come up with a number of options in reality. So the output was, we get a great team engagement and a candidate for line trials. We used pressboard. There were some issues with it, but you know what? It worked okay. The sealing machine, original equipment manufacturer, we were using them, working with their technical guys. We collaborated with them. And the existing equipment was able to work with the new board grades. The environmental brief was met. We used lightweighting as well. And the single SKU was changed as a pilot. And then further SKUs are now planned. So phase 2 would be moving into multi-compartment trays. Again, it's all about delivering through the PDP process, getting the characteristics right. We articulated the benefits. We took people on the journey, if you like, and to use and plagiarize the L'Oreal punchline, because it was worth it, and it is worth it. The brief was met, and led to further and further benefits within their business, both in terms of cost, in terms of flexibility, and you know what? They're starting to deliver other things as well. Okay, so what next? We will try and reach out with you after the webinar. We're going to rerun this with a specific focus discussion, if you like, for your particular business, and we can talk about other things. Meet up, understand the PDP approach in developing a sustainable or sustainability strategy. Of course, we'd like to meet you at industry events, and we'd be very, very happy to come to your offices if you'd like to discuss something in more detail, in more confidential manner. And of course, let's meet up for a coffee. Always good to have one of those. So as a business, just very briefly with IDI-PAC, we solve product and supply chain challenges. That's where the PDP process came from. And it's the design and pragmatically engineered solutions. That's what we're looking to do. For our clients, we provide that practical support, expertise that provides with a wider perspective, hopefully, outside of their own business. We've been around since 2008. And as I've said earlier in previous times, we work at the packaging and supply chain interface, using packaging skills to develop and deliver supply chain solutions. Some of our clients, very, very quickly, I won't bore you with all these, but you can see they're multinationals. We're working with a bunch of guys on sustainability, on a variety of things. So really judges by the sort of companies that we work with. That's the sort of work we do. And that's us in our office. We'd welcome the opportunity to speak to you at any time. Please stay in touch by Twitter, by LinkedIn, and whatever. And before we go, in the last couple of minutes here, we've got a couple of questions in actual fact. What have we got? Any practical benefits that have come out of a PDP